jump in at any or take off at any point, you can always see the full presentation by email and connection. Well, thanks again for everyone being here. We always say from the start, don't judge each day by the harvest you reap, but by the seeds that you plant. And I think we've planted a lot of seeds over the last couple months, and you all are doing such amazing work. And today it's really about trying to think about the next phase of the Nourishing Networks program and what we're doing here with the workshops and where we're going as a group. With that said, let me see here. So today we're going to talk about, to start, reaffirming the core goals of Nourishing Networks, which is to ensure that all people at all times in a given neighborhood, locality, or region can gain and maintain access to affordable, nutritious, and healthy foods. Now, this is an incredibly important goal as a whole for all of us, and I know everyone who's on this call cares deeply about this. But of course, we accomplish this goal, and we try to do this in a lot of different ways. And that's what makes this group really special. And that's why we want to work together to try to figure out ways that we can support each other to advance this goal in general. And so one of the other axioms we kind of start with is that we learn from the experiences that we learn from. Miles Horton, who is the founder and director of the Highlander Folk School and then become the Highlander Research and Education and Research Center down in Tennessee, really encourages us to think about and reflect upon what we've worked on together as a basis for making our next steps. So we're going to think a little bit about our experiences that we've had in each of our workshops moving forward. And the things that we want to cover today, the questions we want to answer for everyone on the call is, who are we? What do we do? What have we accomplished? And where are we going? Obviously, the first question of who we are and who are we, you might think is a question that's directed primarily at myself and my team up here at West Virginia University. The Food Justice Lab has been in and around for about 5 years now, and obviously we've been facilitating this process, but the who we are really on this call today is reflected more broadly in terms of the range of different folks who've participated in the workshops as a whole. Here we've got a little over 50, 60 people who've participated in the workshops, maybe a few more that we've missed. And the kind of affinities of different groups in the workshop represent a kind of a diversity of different agencies represented, a diversity of different sort of orientations that people have for trying to create change in the food system, from folks who work in the WIC office to farmers to gardeners to farmers market directors to nonprofit groups and charitable groups that are working to try and really create change in Wayne, Fayette, and Logan counties. So the initial Nourishing Networks workshops were only hosted in these 3 pilot counties, and we're going to work with these 3 pilot counties for the course of the next year to support the folks who are in those communities to advance their projects. And so when we say who are we, certainly it's the Food Justice Lab is in this. There's been a lot of folks who worked with us and have been working on the Nourishing Networks workshops that are coming from the various communities represented in the workshops. And of course, each of you work with folks on a day-to-day basis too, who are the big we in this conversation. But those who are here in this call today work together in a workshop either in late April, early May, or here in July. And so the goal of today is to kind of talk a little bit about what we did in this workshop and understand where we're going. So these workshops brought real diverse teams together. As I said before, looking at the affinity groups of just those who participated, we had a pretty interesting diversity of participants, largely from agencies that are working on improving access to food, but not only those folks who elected to come because they are personally passionate about these issues in their day-to-day lives. In our workshop, we use some analytical tools. We use some maps. We learned from using some county profiles. We used our own experience to talk about barriers to access to healthy foods. We evaluated food access barriers in teams, often bouncing ideas off of one another about our given county. Again, whether that's Wayne or Fayette or Logan, we talked about what was specific in terms of the access barriers that we confront in those places. And we talked about community assets that could be drawn upon to improve access to food in a given area. These can be individuals, these could be community organizations, these might even be infrastructural assets, they might be land assets, they might be government institutional assets. But the point here is that as a group, there is a discussion around what kind of assets can be drawn together to improve access to food. If I could just ask that everybody mute their that would help a lot. If you all could just mute, thank you. And then lastly, we developed proposals for improving access to healthy food. And this was where, in a sense, the teams in coming together used analytical tools, evaluated the access barriers, drew on their own personal experience, considered the community assets, and then quickly threw together some innovative proposals for improving access to healthy food. And we accomplished all of these things in the course of roughly 6 hours in our workshops. And in a sense, the workshop itself was designed to sort of give an example of how this kind of planning work and how these kinds of discussions could be fostered within a community over a course of a period of time, focused specifically on improving access to healthy food. And in many cases, these conversations are already happening. But again, in bringing diverse teams together, hopefully groups of folks who had not actually been in contact with one another and not communicating across their differences had an opportunity to work together, even for just a brief period of time. And so what did we accomplish in the course of this 6-hour period in each of these counties? Well, our participants identified about 150 or more healthy food access barriers within their counties. Of course, in some regards, these barriers are not germane or are not specific to any of these counties. But what was fascinating is that coming out of the assessment, within each county, there were unique barriers identified by the teams who were conducting their analysis and assessment. There were many, many different community assets that could be leveraged to improve access to food. And these are all, again, represented in the reports that we circulated to you. And there were 17 food access strategies that were developed by the workshop teams, again, in a very short period of time, but very focused attention to linking and identifying the problem of an access barrier to a set of community assets, and then developing a strategy based upon that. And this is important because often, and one of the goals of these workshops is to realize that, in a sense, these strategies, when we look specifically at a given problem and define the problem effectively, when we leverage community assets and think about the dream team that we would want to put together to address the issue, it can more effectively harness those assets to achieve a given goal. And in many cases, nonprofit organizations and university affiliates or government agencies will identify problems in slightly different ways. And they will leverage often particular kinds of assets, or they will write grants to get access to resources to support a given program. But those strategies tend to be developed sometimes in isolation from one another, and don't fully embrace and take advantage of a sort of a hive mind and an ecology of different activities that are happening to support the addressing of a particular problem, developing a sort of a collective solution. And so coming out of the meeting, we had a series of barriers that were identified. And in our analysis of the meeting minutes, we identified 5 major barriers analytically, 5 barriers that seem to keep coming up over and over again. One was socioeconomic, and that of course includes everything from income to composition of a households and demographic information. Demographic barriers, things like being a single mother or being, struggling to maintain a job, or unemployment being a major issue. Also in the socioeconomic barriers included things like the retail location and retail consolidation problem. Again, the socioeconomic barriers, there were very sort of in-depth, and in each of the reports that we circulated, those socioeconomic barriers are listed in raw form. So things that people identified are there in all 3 reports. There's also geographic and infrastructural barriers that were identified. Things like a lack of transportation hubs, or public transportation, or there are issues around the presence or absence of particular kinds of retailers or schools or other charitable agencies not being located in a particular or given region. Barriers in terms of policy or engagement. In this particular case, there were barriers of references to particular regulations that were prohibitive, problems associated with concerns that SNAP were not being accepted at farmers markets, issues around public participation in local government and decision making. These were some of the things that came up in some of the policy and engagement barriers. Issues around the ability to shape decisions at the Board of Education level. These were considered barriers to improving access to healthy food as well. In each of the counties, the workshop participants identified agricultural barriers, from in Logan County, a limited number of farmers, to in Wayne, concerns around a lack of access to land for beginning farmers, to in Fayette, difficulties in gaining and maintaining a sort of a portal or an access point to support a growing agricultural economy there. And then lastly, the community participation issue, which again, sort of similar to policy engagement, but something slightly different, which is, trying to foster community participation in the kinds of efforts that we want to see happen. These are all identified as various barriers, and something that we saw synthetically across all of the reports. And of course, these are conceptual, but within each of these 5 barrier sort of categories, there's a lot more specifics. And I just sort of remind us here about, that we don't want to get lost too conceptually here. There's a lot of very specific things that people have identified that need to be worked on as particular problems that need to be solved so that we can improve access to food. These problems and barriers led into a discussion of community assets, which I won't discuss here because those are very germane and place-based to each of the counties that we participated in. And so what I'd like to do now is talk just briefly about the various strategies that emerged. And these are strategies that we see. First, we'll just say, generally speaking, there were a series of sort of similarities or patterns that we saw coming out of the strategies in all 3 counties. A lot of focus on schools. And again, I think this has to do too with who is participating in the workshops, but also because I think some of the statistics that folks focused on tended to be of concern around kind of schools. But schools are an important asset in every community. And so one was increasing school meal participation as a strategy. In both Wayne and Fayette County, a lot of discussion around community and school agriculture programs, trying to develop a curriculum to sort of reinvest energy and educational resources into building agriculture programs at the schools and in VOTEC. In all three counties, there was discussion about the need for community food hubs or co-ops or a sort of a combined charitable agency / farmer agency that could work to improve access to food produced within the county, but also could provide training around canning and preserving, and could also be sites where culinary training could be provided. Schools and community gardens, lots of discussion around supporting community gardening, and doing that at schools, doing it in community-based locations, doing it also in churches, and creating networks of gardeners. That was something that was discussed in all three counties. Pop-up mobile markets, expanding more of the farming sort of pop-up market model. At the Logan County workshop, in fact, at the workshop itself, there was a connection made to do a mobile market connected to a senior vouchers program at a senior center. And so, sort of trying to forge and think about ways of connecting growers to groups, agencies, DHHR, as well as nonprofit groups that community action groups that are able to mobilize various types of resources to support the development of mobile markets and pop-up markets that are end up in very specific targeted locations to improve access to food for, say, families that are at childcare locations or seniors at a senior center. Expanding summer feeding programs, including expanding the curriculum of summer feeding programs, supporting an expansion of Energy Express. These were things that came up in Wayne and Fayette and in Logan. Local resource guides. This was discussed in both Logan and in Fayette counties. And policy-wise, there was discussion around in all three counties of expanding SNAP and WIC, trying to advance and improve access for low-income families to the use of SNAP and WIC at farmers markets and other retailers, trying to encourage retailers to carry more fresh foods and to assess, evaluate things like price gouging in those places, trying to create other opportunities for people to access food through SNAP and WIC. And also a discussion in Wayne County in particular around the ability to use WIC across borders, and that being a state and potentially a federal policy change that would need to take place. Also, trying to shape policy in our board, in Board of Education and where resources are being spent at schools, trying to expand the agricultural curriculum, and to create more opportunities for young people to begin growing and to do so on school property or school grounds or affiliated with the school. In Fayette County, there was a tremendous amount of discussion around the school agricultural curriculum. And I know in Fayette County as well, there's a lot of discussion around that as well, trying to figure out how to move schools towards a sort of a farmer in every school kind of model. Likewise, there's a lot of discussion in Logan County around the idea of a nutritionist in every school or a nutritional advocate in every school. And this was a really interesting, again, sort of more policy-oriented change, but certainly one which funds could be raised for as well in a nonprofit context. And then lastly, transportation obviously came up in every single one of the counties. And there are a lot of creative things from a sort of a food Uber to the concept of linking up with local bus services to try and support transportation of people to food and then also food to people. So on both sides. I won't go into too much more depth here on the strategies, but what I'd like to just share briefly are just some of the creative names that came up for some of these strategies and how they looked coming out of the workshops. So in Wayne, expanding the WIC Borders campaign, a Wayne County Activities campaign. So this would be increasing agricultural activities both at schools and in the community. There was a goal of linking the food banks and young farmers and to try and promote the development of youth agriculture by supplying food banks. Also in Wayne, the Way Out Wayne supported agriculture, which was the goal being to link up growers with charitable agencies to support a sort of a farm-to-family CSA program, and kind of a subsidized small-scale agriculture for families that would struggle to be able to afford struggle to afford a CSA program otherwise. In Fayette County, exploring deeper roots in Fayette, there was a lot of discussion around a loss of a sort of series of agricultural traditions that they wanted to revive. And exploring deeper roots was in part connected to getting into schools more agricultural education. Same with Farmer in Every School program. Nurture Fayette was a program associated with the Whitlock Farm and a goal to try and build an incubator farm that serves as an educational facility and farm incubator for the county. The Fayette County Good News Travels, the idea here was to create a sort of town crier network that shared information to try and improve access to information on local foods and healthy foods. And the Fayette County Tasty Transport, which is sort of, again, this idea of creating a mechanism to identify those who are struggling to access transportation and support that kind of a transportation network to link them to farmers markets and to other healthy food resources. In Logan, the idea of a nutritional advocate in every school came up, having someone who is working to support healthy meals and work with children. The New Food Days in School was a specific program that they thought would be a really interesting one, which is that every day a new type of food would be introduced in a short presentation or discussion, and trying to sort of challenge students that if they tried a certain number of different types of foods, then they could win prizes. Another is sort of investigating unfair prices for fruits and vegetables in the county. There was some concern around price gouging again, partially because of the limited number of areas that are agencies that sell fresh produce or retailers that sell fresh produce. A food and social services hub, sort of linking a charitable agency with a farmer's market, not unlike what you might see in Philippi at the Heart and Hand program. A food resource guide that could be provided to everyone in the county. Two different mobile market strategies, one at schools and childcare locations and the other at senior centers. And generally concerns around income problem and the need for economic development projects, but also raising wages. So these are just some of the examples of the things that people developed with the Nourishing Networks program. For next steps, I'm aware of everyone's time here. I don't want to spend too much time, but if we do get cut off, I'll send out an email. I'm looking here and it's saying that this might get cut off for some reason. If we do get cut off, I will send an email back out to everyone to join again, but I apologize. So for next steps, we have county food action teams that are being we'd like to propose to the development of community food action teams. These could be anywhere from 5 people per county to 9 people per county. It can be as many people as you like, but the goal here is that you have a diversity of participants. And the action team should be not program or project specific, and in a sense, the folks who are on the call from each county, this is sort of a question about whether you would like to be involved in the long-term or longer range planning of a food, healthy food access plan for your county that would not be project specific or program specific, but that would cross programs and sort of create a long range strategy with maybe even 10 or 20 different projects that could be developed over the course of a period of time, and then would be supported again by the Food Justice Lab and the Nourishing Networks program in terms of funding, but also in terms of sort of long-range support and planning to write grants and things like that to support the overall plan. We'll be hosting a webinar on August 9th, but if you'd like to serve on a food action team in your county, and you're in Wayne County, or if you're in Fayette, or if you're in Logan, please contact us directly. The webinar on August 9th will be open to any and all comers. But if you have a particular interest in participating in a food action team to continue working on your county's food access plan, that's going to be based upon the initial report that we've created, we would love to have your participation and would love to work with you and support you as you develop that action team. In support of that, we're going to host a tri-county conference. This will be Wayne, Fayette, and Logan County Conference in Charleston. And that's going to be in September. And we're working on a date and a location for that, but we'll let everyone know as soon as possible. At that conference, we're going to help to develop these plans further. So to take our reports and to flesh out more what we might be trying to accomplish with any one of these strategies. There will be presentations from each of the counties, and there will be feedback provided both by us, but also your partners in your other counties. And then after that meeting, we will have some discussion around accelerator grants, which will be provided in the spring to support these projects. And in fact, we might even be able to provide that funding even sooner than the spring, depending on where we are in the planning process. So essentially, if each county were to develop, say, 10 short and long range strategies for improving access to food, those teams would then identify what they feel like has the most priority or most promise, and then we will evaluate the budget for what that kind of a project would entail, and then we can provide the funds to support it. Those funds could be used for everything from getting an AmeriCorps to help to support that project, to tools and implements, to funds for meetings, and other activities. So we can talk more about those things at the Tri-County Conference and also on our webinar on August 9th. So, but overall, our goal here is to bring folks together, and on the short term, our next step is that we want to try to support you all to form community action teams that are focused on improving access to healthy food. I know some of you, like for instance, in Fayette County, have the Living Well Working Group. And this would be a subgroup that would also be including folks who maybe don't regularly participate in Living Well Working Group. Or in Logan, again, Pride has a lot of work that's getting done by Pride around these issues. But it's about, and also the Grow Appalachia group that's there, working with Michael Tierney and B. And so, it's about trying to bring a diverse group together. Likewise, in Wayne, there's Access West Virginia and Unlimited Feeders is doing work in that area, and Refresh is doing work in that area. But it's about trying to build a sort of a coalition team of representatives from each of those groups to help to create a common plan that everyone can contribute to. That's our goal, is that really we want to try to get everyone together at the table and support that with continued research support, continued facilitation support, and to cover the costs of hosting what I think will be some really creative meetings that lead to continued plan development. As we've learned over the last couple weeks, putting these reports together is incredibly valuable and an amazing learning experience for us, and we hope that it is for you as well. And we will be continuing to move forward with you to be your sort of support network to convert your ideas into something that you can use going forward to foster collective action in your own communities to improve access to healthy food. So as I said, where are we going? August 9th is our first our first county food action team meeting. And that will be for all three. So if you want to be involved in that call, please contact us by replying to an email to me or to Heidi